On July 16, 1862, two Mississippi slaves, James and Elizabeth Wells, welcomed their first child, Ida, into the world. Under chattel slavery, she was born a slave, but that would change 6 months after her birth when the Civil War ended and the Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves. In Holly Springs, Mississippi, her parents were enslaved by Bowling Spires, a contractor, and after legalized slavery ended, they agreed to continue working for them. While some things would remain the same, change was on the horizon, and post-slavery racial tensions would change their lives and the life of their newborn. James and Elizabeth Wells were both Republicans that were very politically involved. James was part of a political group called the Loyal League, and he helped establish the first historically black college, Shawn University, where he sat on the board of trustees. The freedmen of Holly Springs outnumbered the white men, and the growing prosperity of black people gave the Ku Klux Klan an excuse to terrorize groups invested in uplifting the black race, especially the Loyal League. While this made the Wells nervous, it didn't stop them from teaching their children the importance of education and political literacy. Ida started her education at a very young age and attended Shawn University during her teen years. She was a good student, but often found herself in conflict with the university's mostly white faculty. In 1878, she left school to visit her grandmother, and during that time there was a yellow fever outbreak in the Mississippi Valley. Her grandmother lived outside of Holly Springs, and when Ida got news from her hometown, it was a bit unexpected. A mail carrier came with a letter telling Ida that both of her parents had passed away in her absence. She fainted almost immediately, and when she recovered, she wanted to return to Holly Springs as soon as possible to attend to her siblings. However, her family wouldn't let her return until they received news that the area was clear of yellow fever. By the time she had returned, she learned that one of her siblings had also passed away. James and Elizabeth had buried one of their children 2 years previously, and with the passing of another child, there were now only 6 of them. At this point, most of the children had also had yellow fever. Initially, there were plans of splitting the children up, but Ida was determined to keep her family together. She knew that now she had to become the breadwinner. Wells had been taking a 2-year teaching course at Shawn University and decided that she would adjust her appearance to make herself appear older and take the teaching certification exam. At the age of 16, she managed to pass and was able to secure a job teaching in Holly Springs. She would ride on the back of a mule 5 miles from her home to the school, and she would only return on the weekend to maintain the house. She was able to keep her family together for a moment, but ultimately she wasn't able to, and various family members took over. Under the encouragement of her Aunt Franny, she moved to Memphis, Tennessee in 1881, where she began teaching at a school at a dirt road intersection. She had various teaching jobs in Tennessee, and during the summer she attended Fisk University, where she took teaching courses. She was able to secure a job in Woodstock, and she would take the train to and from work every day. In 1884, she was returning from her teaching job and had purchased a first-class ticket to sit in the front of the train. She was asked to move to the smoking cart by the conductor, and she refused, stating that she had paid for her ticket and had the right to sit where she was. It took 3 men to physically remove her from her seat, and when they did, instead of going to the smoking cart, she got off on the next stop. When she returned to Memphis, she immediately contacted a lawyer and was able to sue the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad Company for $500 in damages. This was the first case of its kind in the South, and it got Ida, who now was in her early 20s, a lot of attention. However, the decision was reversed and she had to return the $500 and pay $200 in court fees. This was the incident that started her path towards journalism. She became a figure that many newspapers wanted to cover, the black teacher who stood up to white supremacy, and at least for a moment, she won. She began writing about racism for various black and Christian-themed newspapers under the pen name Lola. By 1889, she became a partner at the Free Speech and Headlight, a paper owned by Reverend R. Nightingale, who encouraged his parishioners to subscribe to her paper. With her success, she was able to leave behind teaching to pursue journalism full-time. The success of black businesses in Memphis, Tennessee created tension from white competitors. In 1892, Thomas Moss, Calvin McDowell, and Henry Stewart owned a small grocery store called the People's Grocery Company. a white-owned grocer across the street started to lose business. One night, 3 men came into the back of the People's Grocery Company and were set on trashing the business. One of the owners fought back and shot one of the men. All 3 owners, along with 100 other black men, were arrested on suspicion. One night, an all-white lynch mob forced its way into the jail, fished out the 3 owners, and lynched them all. The incident caused so much tension that the sheriff was ordered to shoot on sight any Negro who was causing trouble. This inspired the white population to begin randomly shooting black people. These men were all personal friends of Wells, and she decided to pen an article condemning lynching and organize black citizens to fight against the practice. In her article, Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All of Its Phases, she states that she discovered that there were 161 blacks who were lynched in that year alone. In the free speech, she wrote,
"The city of Memphis has demonstrated that neither character nor standing avails the Negro if he dares to protect himself against the white man or become his rival. There is nothing we can do about the lynching now, as we are outnumbered and without arms. The white mob could help itself to ammunition without pay, but the order is rigidly enforced against the selling of guns to Negroes. There is therefore only one thing left to do: save our money and leave a town which will neither protect our lives and property nor give us a fair trial in the courts, but take us out and murder us in cold blood when accused by white persons."
This was the incident that sparked Wells's career in fighting against lynching. The Black Women's Club in Memphis gave her $500 to investigate lynching, as she discovered that black men were often lynched for petty reasons such as not paying a debt, public drunkenness, or simple disrespect to white people. She also discovered that there were an average of 100 lynching cases per year, and in the space of a month, she covered 8 of them in Memphis alone. She also discovered that 1/3 of these lynchings were from the accusation that black men were pursuing relationships with white women. She stated that violence against them was justified as it was seen as a defense to pure white womanhood. She penned an article for the Free Speech about how white women often initiated these relationships, and this angered white men in the city. When she was out of town speaking in Philadelphia, a mob destroyed the office of the Free Speech and threatened to kill her. Instead of returning back to Memphis, she decided to relocate in Chicago. She continued her crusade against lynching in 1893, traveling through the Northeast United States and Europe. She helped establish the first Black women's civic club in Chicago and Boston. She had a strong hand in the establishment of the NAACP, but would later cut ties with the organization as she disagreed with its mainly white leadership. The next year, she published a red record, Tabulated Statistics, Alleged Causes of Lynching in the United States, 1892 to 1894. She made sure to use all white sources so that they couldn't be challenged. She married Ferdinand L. Barnett, a lawyer, activist, and founder of one of the first black papers in Chicago, The Conservator. After their marriage, she became the owner of The Conservator and then became its editor. She had her first son in 1896 and would have a second son the following year. Her colleagues feared that she would leave work behind to become a mother, but that wasn't in her spirit. She met with President McKinley to speak with him about lynching in South Carolina. He issued a statement condemning lynching, but no legislation was passed. She befriended Susan B. Anthony and Jane Addams and became a suffragette. She marched in the famous 1913 Suffragette March on Washington for a woman's right to vote. She was told initially that she would have to march at the end of the parade with other black women. This made her not want to participate. However, strong-willed as ever, as the parade began, she positioned herself between 2 white men who supported the movement. After World War I, she wrote about the race riots in Chicago, Arkansas, and St. Louis for The Conservator and newspapers across the country. Her time fighting for suffrage inspired her to run for the president of the National Association for Colored Women in 1924. She was defeated, but that didn't stop her from running for senator in Illinois in 1930. She had become frustrated with the lack of action politicians had in addressing the concerns of Chicago's black ghettos. She wouldn't win, but she would blaze trails for other women to run in the future. Ida B. Wells was a trailblazer, and she knew this and was quite disappointed that there wasn't anything being written or recorded about her life. So in the spirit of many of the things that she's done, she decided to pick up her pen and do it herself. She started to write her autobiography in 1928 and would pass away on March 25, 1931. Her autobiography would later be published with edits from her daughter. Ida B. Wells was so many things: an activist, a social researcher, a community organizer, and more than anything, a writer. She sought injustice and dedicated her life to shining a light onto it. She's a testament to how, even in the hardest of times, we should never lose our will to fight for what we know to be right. Even if it means putting pen to paper, your voice could be revolutionary.
If you like this video, you can support my work by becoming a monthly Patreon patron.